Risk management is an ongoing, iterative, and evolving process. And each iteration breaks into 3 phases: risk assessment, risk mitigation, and risk evaluation. It has a continuous and repeatable life cycle, as illustrated here. Inside the risk assessment, first is to identify the risk and its components such as threats, vulnerability, and assets within a well-defined scope. Then identify the risk, such as the likelihood, and analyze their impact. The purpose of risk assessment is to form a comprehensive description of risks, determine this risk according to their impact significance, and rank them based on business strategy and imperatives. Let's use an example here. In IT security, vulnerability scan, such as penetration test, is a tool to identify and analyze the flaws that may allow the malicious attack passing organizations' parameters. But in order to determine if such a flaw really poses a problem for the organization, it's called vulnerability assessment, which is the second part of a risk assessment phase. The vulnerability assessment sets the result of a scan into the context of the organization, then analyzes the impact and assigns an urgency level. Therefore, in risk assessment phase, it generally uses a structured approach that is repeatable via a common set of terminology and matrix. Because it cannot be compared with other assessments outside of the organization, as long as the structure of the assessment and the matrix used to quantify the result are not standardized. But managing risk requires more than understanding where your risk lies and what impact they will have. You also need to proactively determine what to do about each risk you identified. If your risk assessment shows that you have unacceptable levels of risk to your business, then you need to take some actions to counter them. This is the risk mitigation phase. And this is also at the core of decision-making that drives the resource prioritization and allocation. It regards the decisions on how to counter the unacceptable risk that include recommending countermeasures or controls to reduce the risks and conduct cost-benefit analysis for each countermeasure and prioritize the implementation plan for those controls. Examples of controls include policies, procedures, guidelines, technical solutions, or organization structures, which can be administrative, technical, managemental, or legal in nature. After these controls are implemented and deployed, we enter into the third phase, risk evaluation. Is to continue monitoring the risk and analyze the effectiveness of the deployed controls. If the risks have been mitigated to the acceptable level, these controls are deemed as effective. When the controls are ineffective or new risks are emerging, next round of risk assessment will then kick off, and so on, so forth. So in summary, risk management is a rigorous discipline that builds upon a set of principles, consistent terminologies, and the matrix, and an iterative, proactive structure process. Organizations have approached security risk management with various approaches. In the past, many organizations are introduced to security risk management by the necessity of responding to a relatively small security incident, such as staff member's computer becomes infected with a virus, for example. As an reactive approach, incident response process is an example of such approach. Typically, when an incident occurs, first you need to contain the damage, assess damage, and then determine the cause, repair the damages, then review response and update policies or procedures. This means that an organization that takes time to respond to security incidents in a calm and rational manner, while determining the underlying reasons that allow the incident to transpire would be better able to both protect itself from similar problems in the future and respond more quickly to other issues that may arise. The ways to determine the cause include review system configuration, patch level, system logs, audit logs, and audit trails on both the systems that were directly affected as well as network devices that route traffic to them. These reviews often help you to discover where the attack originated in the system and what other resources are affected. When it is not possible to assess the damage in a timely manner, you should implement a contingency plan so that normal business operations and productivity can continue. In recent years, as the volume and the frequency of cybersecurity incidents increase, huge amounts of historical data have been gathered, which dramatically helped an organization to better predict and prepare for unforeseen problems that arise in the future, through anomaly detection, for instance. So it should not completely forsake incident response. We'll cover this more in Data-Driven Security Analytics Unit. The second category of risk management approaches are proactive with a goal to prevent or prepare for the future incident ahead of time. Inside this category, there are two distinct ways to characterize the risk. One is based on the quantitative research assessment. The other is on qualitative research assessment. Risk is assessed by identifying threats and vulnerability, then determining the likelihood and impact for each risk. This is a complex undertaking, usually based on imperfect information. So risk assessments involve processing a large quantity of data. Often hundreds or even thousands of accident scenarios must be evaluated to estimate the risk of an operation. Risk analysts should consider the level of detail needed in the risk results before starting the risk assessment process. There are many methodologies aimed at allowing risk assessment to be repeatable and provide consistent results. Quantitative risk assessment draws upon methodologies used by financial institutions and insurance companies. By assigning values to information systems, business processes, recovery costs, etc., impact and therefore risk can be measured in terms of direct and indirect cost. Quantitative risk characterization methods provide decision makers with a precise description of risk. However, this method often involves detailed studies that are very resource intensive and require a substantial level of experience and expertise among analysis team members. Also, be careful not to confuse precise description of risk with the accuracy or certainty of those descriptions. Two common forms of quantitative risk characterizations are point risk estimates. An analyst team uses historical data from directly related operational experience, expert judgment, and data published from other applications of similar equipment or human activities to estimate, first, the frequency of initiating events for various accident scenarios. Second, the probability of a failure for each control. The effect of consequence, often measured in cost or injuries or death, is also estimated. Probability distribution. A risk assessment team assigns probability distributions to reflect the possible range of event frequencies, probabilities, and consequences that may be applicable for specific assessment. This method is more robust than simply selecting point estimates as described above, because uncertainty associated with each key frequency's probability or consequence number is modeled. We'll give an overview of this method in next unit. Quantitative risk measurement is the standard way of measuring risk in many fields, such as a financial institution or insurance. Based on the quantitative assessment, risks can be prioritized by financial impact and asset financial values. And this quantitative result can facilitate risk management by return on security investment. Furthermore, accuracy tends to increase over time as the organization builds historical data while gaining experiences. However, with the immense scale of today's open and highly interconnected cyberspace, there are so many unknown and diverse factors, such as global operations, geopolitical tensions, business partner relationship, may contribute to the likelihood of any cyber threat, and the cost of damages, like loss or disruption it may cause, are extremely difficult to measure. Another disadvantage is that there is no formal and rigorous way to effectively calculate values for assets and controls. And it is also quite costly and time-consuming to conduct quantitative assessment. Therefore, quantitative assessment is not commonly used to measure risk in information systems today. Qualitative risk assessment assumes that there's already a great degree of uncertainty in the likelihood and impact values, and defines them and then risks in somewhat subjective or qualitative terms. Similar to the issues in quantitative risk assessment, the great difficulty in qualitative risk assessment is defining the likelihood and impact values. Moreover, this value need to be defined in a manner that allows the same scales to be consistently used across multiple risk assessments. Qualitative risk assessment is usually conducted through a combination of questionnaires and collaborative workshops involving people from a variety of disciplines or groups within the organization. The results of qualitative risk assessments are inherently more difficult to concisely communicate to management. Qualitative risk assessment typically give risk result high, moderate, and low, or a scale from 1 to 5 based on expert subjective estimation on likelihood and impact. However, by providing the impact and likelihood definition tables and the description of the impact, it is possible to adequately communicate assessment to the organization's management. As illustrated here, it is the risk matrix, a widely used approach in security risk assessment. The horizontal axis is likelihood of occurrence, and the vertical is impact. Both are rated subjectively by human experts on the 1 to 5 scale. These two values are used to plot this risk matrix, which then further divided into sections of low, medium, and high risks. Events with high likelihood and high impact would be the upper right high risk corner, where those with low likelihood and low impact would be in the opposite low risk corner. The idea is that the higher the score, the more important something is, and the sooner you should address it. This straightforward and intuitive representation enables great visibility and understanding of risk ranking, especially for people who are not expert on security. It is easier to reach consensus. But the drawback is that it provides insufficient differentiations between important risks and difficult to justify investment in control implementation because there's no basis for cost-benefit analysis. The results from qualitative assessment methods are dependent on the quality of the risk management team. Recall that the purpose of assessing risk is to assist decision makers in determining where to direct resources. There are 4 basic strategies for managing risks: mitigation, transference, acceptance, avoidance. For each risk in the risk assessment report, a risk management strategy must be devised and that reduce the risk to an acceptable level for an acceptable cost. Mitigation is the most commonly considered risk management strategy. It involves fixing the flaw and providing some type of compensatory controls to reduce the likelihood or the impact associated with the flaw. A common mitigation for technical security flaw is to install a patch provided by the vendor. Sometimes the process of determining mitigation strategy is called control analysis. Transference is the process of allowing another party to accept the risk on your behalf. Like a car, health, and life insurance are all ways to transfer risk. In these cases, risk is transferred from the individual to a pool of insurance holders, including the insurance company. Note that this does not decrease the likelihood or fix any flaws, but it does reduce the overall impact, primarily financial impact, on organization. Recently, cyber insurance is gaining momentum as more demands from business and individuals to seek protection from internet-based risks. Acceptance is the practice of simply allowing the system to operate with a known risk. Many low risks are simply accepted. Risks that can have extremely high cost to mitigate are also often accepted. Be aware of high risks being accepted by management. Ensure that this strategy is in writing and accepted by the managers making the decision. Often, risks are accepted that should not have been accepted. And then when the penetration occurs, the IT security personnel are held responsible. So typically, business managers, not IT security personnel, are the ones authorized to accept risk on behalf of an organization. Avoidance is the practice of removing the vulnerable aspect of the system or even the system itself. For instance, during a risk assessment, a website was uncovered that let vendors view their invoices using a vendor ID embedded in the HTML file name as the identification, and no authentication or authorization per vendor. When notified about the web pages and the risk to the organization, management decided to remove the web pages and provide vendor invoices via another mechanism. So in this case, the risk was avoided by removing the vulnerable web pages.